Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. This week we're going over UFC Vegas 21, headlined by Leon Edwards, the return of Leon Edwards, who hasn't competed since July of 2019 when he took home a decision victory over Rafael dos Anjos. He fights short notice Belal Muhammad, who's coming in a quick turnaround. A month ago, he just beat Diego Lima, but unfortunately, Khamzat Chimaev pulls out, and we get Belal Muhammad stepping in to keep Leon Edwards active. Now, I'm very excited to break down this fight for you guys, as you guys will hear me later on in the card, but I'm just glad to get a high-level fighter like Leon Edwards back into the cage. The guy deserves one of those higher-level fights, and that's what they've been trying to get him. And not to mention, if he went out there and beat Woodley like he was scheduled to do back in March of last year, probably would have been fighting for a title late last year. But here we are. A ton of bad luck for Leon Edwards in terms of getting back into the cage, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing him compete, and this is a good step for him to go in there and fight a guy like Belal Muhammad, who's on a bit of a run himself. 4 straight wins, not to mention that amazing performance he had against Diego Lima back in February 13th. But ton of great fights on this card here. I mean, it's littered with some solid spots. Misha Cirkunov versus Ryan Spann, Dan Ige versus Gavin Tucker. Ton of fun fights. Very much looking forward to breaking it down for you guys and talking about it from a betting perspective. Before we do that, make sure we always go over to our betting recap, something that a lot of people completely neglect in their podcasts, and that is just not something that you should be doing, especially if you want to remain transparent and if you want to be well respected within the community. Make sure you guys go over your last bets. Just saying. All right, let's get into the plays here. I only had 2 plays, and we're going back to that old school lock of the night format. Just like I told you guys last week, we're going 1 lock of the night play, 1 dog of the night play, slow and steady wins the race, and that's exactly what we're doing. So, lock of the night play comes through. 4 units on Sean Brady, minus 196. Great line. Happy to get that line. And he went out there and did what he did. You know, I mean, I believe there was just one small part where we had a hiccup in that first round where Jake Matheus landed a good shot. It ended up being a trip that eventually got Sean Brady on the ground, but Brady did a good job in terms of recovering and controlling the rest of that round, and then eventually getting the submission in round 3. Kid is super talented. Can't wait to see how they continue to build him up. But this Jake Matheus win is a big one for him and a big one for us as well to get our lock of the night plays back on track. And then we had a dog of the night play, which kind of fell on his face. Minus 1.5 units on Joseph Benavidez at plus 112. Not much to say here. I will admit when I'm wrong. I was wrong here. Askarov is much better than I expect him to be. I know the kid's talented, you know what I mean? But I just didn't expect him to go out there and beat Benavidez the way that he did. And that just happens sometimes, you know what I mean? We predict 12 fights a week, sometimes 15 fights a week. We're going to get some wrong. Just saying. I thought Benavidez still had the chops to go out there and beat a scrambled king. Unfortunately, he just wasn't able to, and Askarov gets the W that night. It is what it is. We end up losing that one, but we still end up 0.54 units up on the night. All that matters to me is that we're hitting the lock of the night plays, and that's what's going to matter to me moving forward. That's my main focus. You guys come to me for a lock of the night play. I give you a lock of the night play, and we're going to continue to hit them at a heavy clip. I mean, if you guys go over to my Bet MMA tips that I like to keep updated on an event-to-event basis that everybody should be doing, you guys see that my big favorites, which is minus 180 and worse, I'm hitting at an 81% clip for a 15% ROI, and that's what I should be focusing on. And that's what we're going to be focused on moving forward for the rest of the year. And, the highest I'll go is minus 350. I'll never try to pass minus 350 unless there's absolutely nothing left on the card that I don't trust my money on. And there are 2 spots that I trust my money on this weekend, but I ended up going with one of them, and you guys will figure it out once we get into the actual breakdown. So again, plus 0.54 units on the night. Happy to get that small win, but we are even happier to get the lock of the night playing, because that's what you guys come to me for, and that's what you rely on me for. So that's what I'm hoping to continue to provide for you guys. All right, a couple plugs before we get into the breakdowns. Make sure you guys check out Coolbet. That's Coolbet.com. Use the promo code MMALOTN2. That's the number 2. And they will match your initial deposit all the way up to $200. 100%. They'll match it up to $200. So make sure you guys check that out. They have great odds. It's mainly available in Canada and a bunch of Scandinavian countries. I have all the details in the description below. So make sure you guys check that out. Again, great props. You can parlay props. Great odds as well too. That's where I managed to snag there's a line within the last couple of weeks where I was just like, I'm very surprised that I was able to get it on this website at that line. I believe it was the Alexis Davis line at plus 173. That was a very, very solid line that I was able to snag there. Even Jared Gordon plus 120, I managed to get on there as well. So yeah, check out Coolbet. Secondly, check out the Patreon. $5 a month. You guys get early access to the breakdowns. You guys get early access to the picks. Obviously, the picks usually drop for free on Fridays, unless I'm on a 3-event winning streak. And I expect a 3-event winning streak to be right around the corner. So make sure you guys get a jump start on that stuff. We got a great Discord community as well too. Those guys are freaking amazing. I love chatting it up with them on a daily and regular basis, just breaking fights down and talking shit. And then the best bets and props article. I'm adding a live betting aspect to that as well to help you guys be prepared for, just live betting a fight. You want to make sure you have your ducks in a row before the fight actually starts. So then when shit starts to fly, you know that you're prepared and ready to go and pull the trigger where you need to pull the trigger. So that's what we have there. And not to mention me adding my confidence ratings on my best bets and props as well, so that you guys know which props and bets that I'm the most confident in and which ones I'm not so confident in. A lot of people are digging that aspect. So many other perks, $5 a month, best deal on the market, I'd say, and you're getting some solid quality out of it as well. So make sure you guys check out the Patreon. Link is in the description below. There is one more thing that I want to touch on, and that is, I've let a couple people know already, March 26th is going to be the last day that your boy's going to be reporting to a 9 to 5. Your boy's doing this shit full time, and it's all thanks to you guys. So I want to give a big shout out to all the subscribers, all the people that all the people that follow me on Twitter, all the Patreon members. It's all thanks to you guys that I'm able to finally do this thing on a full-time basis, and I can't wait to do it. I'm going to be adding ACA, I'm going to be adding LFA, I'm going to be adding Bellator. You guys are going to get a ton more content out of me, and it's going to be my 100% full focus, and I'm doing it the right way. And, that's what matters to me at the end of the day. 100% transparent, 100%, morality, everything taken into consideration. I'm here for you guys and giving you guys the best reads that I can possibly give on a fight-to-fight and an event-to-event basis. And again, it's a dream come true. I didn't truly believe, 3 or 4 years ago when I started this damn thing that I'd actually be able to do it. But here I am, 2 weeks away from doing this thing full time. And again, it's thanks to you guys. So shout out to you guys for allowing me to do that. All right, let's get away with the sappy shit. Let's get into the breakdowns. Hope you guys enjoy them. Again, like and subscribe to the video if you haven't already. And if you guys want to support your boy a little bit more, the Patreon link is in the link below, $5 a month. Best way to support your boy and continue this journey on to giving you guys the best breakdowns possible on a week-to-week basis. All right, good luck on your bets and enjoy the breakdowns. Jason Witt versus Matheus Semelsberger. We got minus 120 on the Semi-Jedi, I believe his nickname is, or Semi the Jedi, and plus 100 on Jason Witt. If you do look at a couple other bookies, you will see probably a better line on Jason Witt as well, but plus 100 is roughly the line that is widely available. Let's start off on the Jason Witt side, right? This is going to be his second fight in the UFC with the legitimate training camp. His first fight was against Takashi Sato, where he came in on super short notice and lost that fight within a minute, but then came back and looked amazing in his fight against Cole Williams, taking him down pretty much at will, and then eventually submitting him in the second round. So saw a great performance from him there and showed off what he truly is about as a full MMA fighter, and not just a guy that got knocked out in less than a minute by Takashi Sato. Semelsberger, on the other hand, had a little bit of an abbreviated training camp against Carlton Minus, both of who I believe, both fighters accepted that fight on somewhat short notice just to fill out a card, and we saw a great performance from Semelsberger that night, being able to keep the fight at distance and just being more having more volume and having more damage on his strikes as well compared to Carlton Minus, who just doesn't really have the greatest pop on his shots. Had decent volume from what at least we saw on his regional tape, but when he actually got into the cage, he was having a lot of time, a lot of struggles against a guy in Semelsberger who just hit way harder and was much more active and much more showing a lot better movement as well too. Now, the knock on Semelsberger from my end is more so his takedown defense. It doesn't look the greatest on the regional scene. And for him, the regional scene was really not that long ago. Like, this is only his second fight in the UFC, but you're seeing him in past fights getting taken down and controlled. And I feel like, Jason Witt will be the best wrestler / best jiu-jitsu player that he's gone up against up until this point. And I think it's going to truly cause him some problems. I like to make the comparison here with Semelsberger and Danny Chavez from a couple weeks ago, where they had a great debut, but you have to kind of look at their opponent and the lack of resistance that they brought to the table compared to how good they actually looked. Now, I don't want to, completely shit on Semelsberger here. He looked great in that debut, and he did what he should have done against a guy like Carlton Minus. But now you're going up in the level of competition. And Jason Witt, maybe not a top 15, top 10 guy at this point in time, but definitely levels above of what Carlton Minus was bringing to the table in Matheus' debut in the UFC. But Jason Witt, he's going to bring a completely different game. He will be outsized, by 3 inches in the height and as well as 5 inches on the reach. But that reach and height and size disadvantage doesn't really matter once this fight is actually taking place on the ground or in the clinch position, which is where I think that Jason Witt will be successful in getting this fight there. I think he's he's hunting for the submission quite often. 8 of his 18 victories have come via submission. So I think he's going to be, taking down Semelsberger time and time again and seeking that submission. Maybe an arm triangle choke is probably his favorite path to victory. I think he has more rear naked chokes than anything, but I feel like in this matchup particularly, he will have success with that arm triangle choke. He is another guy out of Glory MMA with James Krause heading his training camp. So that's always a positive to have. And then Semelsberger is coming out of, I believe, Maryland. And, not the biggest gym or any crazy training partners there. But up until this point, it's worked out for him. He's 7-2. Now, speaking of 7-2, this is only going to be his 10th pro MMA fight, whereas Jason Witt, this is going to be his 25th. So you're talking about 2.5 times the amount of experience that Semelsberger has, 2.5 times the amount of, times going into the cage and fighting all these different types of guys compared to Semelsberger, who hasn't fought, in my opinion, anybody to the level of a Jason Witt at this point, especially with the wrestling and grappling prowess that he brings to the table. So with the poorest takedown defense from Semelsberger's side, I feel like it's going to be difficult for Matthew to keep this fight on the feet and really implement his strength, which is the striking. I do think that Matt will have the advantage in the striking realm here. I do think he'll be able to kind of piece up Jason Witt for as long as it stays up on the feet. And I think he has a good potential or a good chance of potentially knocking out Jason Witt as well. But I think this is where it gets to the point where Jason Witt closes the distance very, with good discipline, good fight IQ, small cage. Again, another advantage that favors the grappler. And I think we'll see Jason Witt use it to its fullest extent. Close the distance, maybe eat a couple shots on the way, and that's definitely going to happen. But I don't think that Semelsberger will do the greatest in terms of being able to shuck off the takedowns here. So I see Jason Witt getting this fight down time and time again. Maybe a submission, maybe a decision, but I think that this is again a grappler versus striker type matchup. And more often than not, I follow where I tail the grappler here, and I do like what I see from Jason Witt. Jason is one of the two favorites that I truly, or two underdogs that I really like on this card, and it was kind of difficult trying to pick between the two, but I ended up going with the other dog as an official bet. But if I were to make one more official bet for a dog, Jason Witt would be that guy. So I like Jason Witt here. I think he gets the takedowns, and I think he finds a submission as well. So I'll go with Jason Witt to win this fight via second round submission. Jinh Yu Frey versus Gloria de Paula. We got minus 190 on the UFC newcomer Gloria de Paula and plus 165 on Jinh Yu Frey. Let's start off on the Frey side, who's coming off of 2 straight losses now to Kay Hansen, where she got submitted. I believe that happened in the 3rd round. And then she lost a decision to Luma Lokpunmi, who, easily won those first 2 rounds off of her tie clinch and striking and absolutely beating up Jinh Yu Frey in those close quarter exchanges. And then we see Jinh Yu Frey go out there and land a beautiful takedown right off the bat in that 3rd round, but unfortunately was not able to keep the fight there for the majority of that round. Fight gets back to his feet, and we see Loma once again have success in the stand-up, have success in the clinch, and Frey just could not get any of her game off. Now we're starting to see the regression of Jinh Yu Frey. She's 35 years old. She was the former atomweight champion over there in Invicta, and since coming to the UFC, she's been forced to go up a weight class, and it just has not worked out for her. And I think that her best days are truly behind her. One thing that she will still have, though, is her strength and her ability to possibly grind out decisions and grind out wins if her opponents aren't able to get out of those situations. Like with Kay Hansen, she was going up against a superior jiu-jitsu player. With Loma Lokpunmi, she was going up against a superior Muay Thai fighter, especially in that clinch position. But what is she going up here against with Gloria de Paula, who's only 7 fights into her MMA career, 5-2, and she's shown to be, you can go out there and grind her out. But when you're at distance, she looks like a killer. She has all the technical capabilities. She's going out there and showing off great Muay Thai, great distance striking, great kicks, and she looks like a very polished product. But the fights that really stick out to me are fights against Ariane Carnelosi and Isabella Dupadua, both girls that are in the UFC right now. but not really at the higher level or even at the mid level, to be honest. Like Isabella de Padua, if you guys remember, she was the one that stepped in on super short notice against Ariane Lipski and made Ariane Lipski look, much better than she's ever looked before. And de Padua was able to do a good job in terms of continuously moving forward, pushing de Paula up against the cage, dragging her to the ground, and getting a bunch of control time as well from the top position. Frey could absolutely do that. I think Frey could push her up against the cage, make it a dirty fight, drag it to the ground, show that takedown that she did against Loma in that third round, and possibly, just win this off of control time. However, I just think that she is starting to regress. I think that we're seeing de Paula kind of come into her own. Do I agree with her being up there at minus 190? Probably not. Like, I'm picking her to win. Don't get me wrong, but I just think that we need to see a little bit more from her before I can invest in her. Like, early thoughts were her as a possible lock of the night play, but I always think back to what my guy Scott Shelvok always says, is that think macro, not micro. And for right now, we only have a micro sample size of de Paula. She looked great on the Contender Series. She won 3 rounds, stuffed a couple takedowns. Even when she got taken down, we saw a decent offensive guard. But that's just against a girl that was 3-0 or 4-0 at the time. Jinh Yu Frey's been around for a while now. She has 15 fights on her record, but she's been fighting all these different types of women, all these different types of styles. And obviously age isn't on her side at this point in time, but if she's able to go out there and make this a grimy fight, don't give de Paula the room that she needs to operate, then, the people with that minus 190, minus 200 on de Paula are going to be, itching their head a little bit. Like, even Frey was given a little bit of trouble to Kay Hansen in that first round. And I know that Kay, again, more of a jiu-jitsu player than a striker, and that's where Frey was getting the better of the exchanges, was in the striking realm. So I do expect Apollo to get the better in the striking realm here, but once it gets wrapped up and these women are like, trying to clinch up with each other, I feel like the strength of Frey will start to show itself. But I just don't have the most confidence out there to go out there and lay the money on her. With that said, I'm not going to be going out there and laying big money on de Paula as well, because this, in my opinion, this is a great test for her. Go out there, showcase that you can go up against a fighter that's going to be physically stronger than you. Show off that you can, shuck off some takedowns, maintain your distance, and get your striking going. She's going to be up against it, especially in the smaller cage too. So if Frey is able to kind of, push her back a little bit with some feints or a couple of striking exchanges, she can just bull rush forward and start pushing de Paula up against the cage and making it a grimy, dirty fight. And that's what would, really allow Jinh Yu Frey to find some success in this fight. So experience, no doubt about it. It's obviously on the Frey side. Strength on the Frey side. Grappling could be on the Frey side as well too. But de Paula, solid jiu-jitsu, at least from what I've seen thus far. I just didn't like what I saw from the de Padua fight, which was like just less than 2 years ago, and it was only 3 fights ago for her. So it's not like we haven't seen the chinks in her armor. And Frey absolutely has the capabilities to make this a tougher fight than it should be. But I do like the striking mechanics and the tendencies that we've been seeing from de Paula in terms of maintaining her distance, getting her work done in the clinch as well too. She has some pretty good knees from there. I don't really rate her second last opponent, even though she was undefeated going into that fight. I think she was only 3-0 or 4-0 at the time, but the girl was completely outsized against de Paula, and she was very much struggling to try to get this fight to the ground. And de Padua was obviously outsized as well, but she was able to get the fight to the ground. But Frey, I gotta believe, is the strongest fighter that de Paula has fought to this point, so that gives me a little bit of concern. So I will still lean the de Paula side. I'm going to be a little bit more hesitant on it than most people seem during this fight week, but I do think she will be able to keep it at distance, get her strikes off. If it does end up in the clinch positions, get a couple knees off, and then break, and then start doing your work again from distance. And yeah, I think she pulls off a decision victory here, but it's going to be much closer than people think. I don't have the utmost confidence out there to go actually pick and bet Jinh Yu Frey, but I think people need to be skeptical about just, gunslinging de Paula parlays here, because I think it will get a little bit sketchy if Frey is able to, close the distance and use her strength to her advantage. I think she has decent cardio as well too, so that should help her in this situation. But again, de Paula, still young, 25 years old, has a ton of time to grow. She just needs a lot more experience. And if we're able to get that out of her, I think she can turn into a pretty bright prospect in this 115-pound division and maybe start to run things for the women's divisions with her significant other, who I believe is Mayra Bueno Silva. But yeah, I do like De Paula here. I think she wins by decision, but this fight's going to play out a little bit closer than most people are expecting it to. JJ Aldrich versus Courtney Casey. We got minus 150 on JJ Aldrich and plus 130 on Courtney Casey. Let's start off on the JJ Aldrich side of things, who we haven't seen since UFC 246, I believe it was, back in January of 2020, where she lost a very close split decision to Sabina Mazo. Now, if you go to MMA decisions, you see over 70% of the fan votes came in on Aldrich, thinking that she won rounds 1 and 2, and obviously round 3 to Sabina Mazo, who had great, Muay Thai clinch control, good control up against the cage, and did a ton of damage against Aldrich, especially with her knees in that round. But the first 2 rounds, we see a great game plan from Aldrich, which is just continuously moving forward and then picking her shots to throw that 1-2 down the middle. Her southpaw stance really causes some issues for her opponents, but the thing that is the best about her is her commitment to her combinations. Like sometimes you'll only get 2 or 3 strike combinations out of her, but you're getting very impactful ones that actually show the damage on her opponent's faces, just as we saw from Sabina Mazo after 2 rounds with going with JJ Aldrich and trying to stand in the pocket and exchange with her. Aldrich does a good job with her footwork and her movement, and again, her southpaw stance really causes issues for her opponents, especially if they're not the greatest in the striking realm. Now, Sabina Mazo, again, she did a good job in that 3rd round to take the fight back, and I think that there was a judge that probably shouldn't have, or at least 2 of them that were a little bit skeptical regarding that 2nd round. It seemed like Aldrich definitely had that in the bag, especially with the amount of damage that she was able to incur on Sabina Mazo that night. The fight before that, we saw the Lauren Mueller fight. I thought it was 1-1 going into that 3rd round, and that's where we saw JJ really start to turn it up, land some big shots on Mueller starting off that round, and really set the tone for the rest of that round, and she was able to cruise to a decision victory in that. And that was the night that I actually had her as a lock of the night play at the same price tag that she's currently at here against Courtney Casey, and I was hella confident in it, and thankfully it came through that night. Before that, goes in against Maycee Barber and steals that 1st round. Again, commitment to her combinations and her strikes pays dividends in that 1st round against Maycee Barber. Drops her on her butt, I think twice, but unfortunately for her, she just was not able to deal with the power that Maycee Barber has in that 2nd round. And Maycee Barber is probably one of the hardest hitters in that division as well. So not the worst thing in the world for JJ Aldrich to kind of succumb to that type of power. She's definitely not going up against that type of power here against Courtney Casey. And then before that, she came through as a dog of the night play for me as against Poliana Vienna, and I got her pretty much at openers. This was a little bit earlier into my handicapping world, so the unit sizes weren't as bigger, but I got her at plus 240, which I thought was absolutely insane, and I believe she closed around that plus 135, plus 140 range, and she still had a ton of value at that point. Poliana really struggled to get the fight to the ground, and even when it got there, she just wasn't the most effective with JJ. I believe at that time was a purple belt. Now she's a brown belt. Her submission defense was definitely on point, and it helped out with her to secure the victory that night. Courtney Casey, on the other hand, she's been flipping wins and losses over her last 5 fights. She's 2-3 in her last 5. The most notable win in that stretch was her Angela Hill fight, where she actually beat Hill via decision, and it was quite a close fight. We saw Angela Hill have trouble in terms of dealing with the amount of output and some of the takedowns that Casey was landing in that fight, but a very, very close fight. Again, that's just Angela Hill. As you guys will hear later in this podcast about me breaking down her fight with Ashley Yoder, she just fights super close, and it was a super close fight against Courtney Casey, and Courtney Casey comes out with the W that night. So good win for Casey there. The Cynthia Calvillo fight is one that I like to lean on here, though, where she's going to be dealing with a similar style with JJ Aldrich. I think the difference between Calvillo and Aldrich is that Calvillo, I think, is a little bit more of an aggressive grappler and better jiu-jitsu player. And she moves a little bit better than JJ Aldrich, or at least moves more than JJ Aldrich. Maybe not better, but just more than her. But that fight primarily took place in the stand-up realm, and we saw Cynthia Calvillo have a ton of success. I believe she took all 3 rounds on judges' scorecards. She outstruck Courtney Casey by 9 strikes in the significant strike realm. And she had a ton of success with her 1-2 down the middle. And I think that's the same thing that we're going to see JJ Aldrich have success with here as well, too. It's going to be tough for Courtney Casey to deal with that those combinations that are coming her way. More often than not, you see Casey throwing winging hooks and more winging shots rather than, straight down the middle. She does have a decent jab, especially when she's able to implement that 67-inch reach that she has. But she's going to have a she won't have a reach advantage here. I think the reach is pretty much the same, and she has a 2-inch height advantage. But Cynthia Calvillo, she had a 3-inch height advantage over Calvillo and still was struggling to get away from the big shots of Calvillo, and especially her combinations. Now, JJ Aldrich will have a 2-inch height disadvantage here, but I think her commitment to the strikes are going to make it a little bit more difficult for Casey to get her game going and really start to score. It might even look similar to the Sabina Mazo fight, where we see the output coming from Courtney Casey, but the more damaging shots come from JJ Aldrich. And that's kind of what holds me off of making a play on JJ Aldrich at big money. Like, to be honest, coming into this card, I was thinking, okay, she could be live as a potential lock of the night play. And even though she's minus 150, I think there's solid value on her given the game plan that she normally brings into her fights. But, I found somebody else on this card that I'm a lot more confident in, feel like they won't have as close of a fight as this fight could potentially be. But I still think that she has a high upside of winning this fight. And even her prop bet at plus 100, I think is a very sneaky play, as, most of her victories have come via decision. And I do think that we'll see that come to fruition once again for JJ Aldrich. The last two fights are hard to really depict what we can, extract for Courtney Casey in terms of her fights with Mara Romero Barella and Jillian Robertson, which were mainly, clinch fights, grappling fights. I don't expect that kind of approach here from Aldrich, who again is a brown belt. So if it does hit the ground, I think she'll hold her own there. And the takedown defense on Courtney Casey is just porous. She's giving out takedowns pretty much every single fight she's going in there. Even the Jillian Robertson fight, right? She gives up 3 takedowns. Gives up a takedown to Mara Romero Barella. Gives up 3 takedowns to Michelle Waterson, 4 takedowns to Jessica Aguilar, 6 takedowns against Claudia Gadelha. But obviously that one makes sense. So if JJ wants to attack that, maybe she could have some success there and make it not as close of a fight. But that's not really the style that we've been seeing from Aldrich. It's her confidence in her hands, confidence in her boxing, and ability to move forward and land the more damaging strikes. And I think that's what we're going to see here from JJ. So I think she's a great spot here. Minus 150 is not too bad of a price tag. And I think, 7 or 8 out of 10 times she outstrikes Courtney Casey, at least to the extent of landing the more damaging blows. Now, what kind of judges are we going to be getting that night, right? Are they going to be counting the volume for Casey? But I feel like the damage of JJ will be way more apparent than the volume that we're going to be seeing from Casey. And Casey, she whiffs at air quite a lot, especially in that Cynthia Calvillo fight. We see Calvillo get out of the way of these big shots. JJ does move her head well and pivots off the center line quite well, especially after throwing her combinations. So I think we'll see Casey struggle in that aspect as well. So I'm going JJ Aldrich. I'm taking her to win this fight by decision. And yeah, I think she's a very solid spot this night on this card. And once again, I'll take her to win this fight via decision. Nasrat Haqparast versus Rafa Garcia. We got minus 380 on Haqparast and plus 315 on Rafa. Let's start off on the Haqparast side, who's coming off an unfortunate weight miss when you're scheduled to fight Arman Tsarukyan. I believe that was supposed to be the UFC 257 card. He falls off that card. Takes a little bit of time off, and now he's right back at it, fighting a UFC newcomer here in Rafa. I believe Haqparast was supposed to fight Don Madge this weekend. Unfortunately, Madge pulls out. That would have been a great fight. I was really looking forward to that one. But now he gets somewhat of a layup here in Rafa Garcia. Last time we saw Nasrat, he went out there and won a decision victory over Alex Munoz. That's quickly after he had gotten knocked out by Drew Dober. So I'm sure he just wanted to get that bad taste out of his mouth. And he did just that. Gets in there against Munoz, gets the victory, and gets back on the winning track. He's still only 25 years old, which is crazy to believe. But the kid has a ton of potential and a ton of time to truly flesh out into being a complete mixed martial artist. But what's his bread and butter? It's his striking, right? He uses his distance very well. His 1-2 is sharp, quick, and very fast down the middle, and it does definitely cause his opponents a ton of trouble. He moves very well. His kicks are good as well, and I think that he'll definitely have Rafa beat in the striking realm. Now, if we're talking about the wrestling realm, I feel like if Rafa wants to get this fight to the ground, he's going to really struggle. Haqparast has shown solid takedown defense throughout his UFC career, and I feel like that a guy like Rafa, who is struggling to get down guys from past opponents, especially on that Combate seen he's going to struggle in the UFC as well. Now at 12-0, he seems like he has a flashy record. If you watch his Instagram, you see that he's training with guys like Marlon Chito Vera and BJ Penn in there a couple times, Brian Ortega. I believe it's the RCVA. I might be completely off on this, but I think that's the gym that he's training out of, which is Jason Perlow's gym. But, at 12-0, a couple UFC veterans under his belt, the guy seems like he is ready to come to the UFC. 26 years old, still young in the game, and but once you actually watch him fight, I think it's a little bit difficult to draw how he's truly going to win this fight unless Nasrat's chin is completely gone and we see him knock him out. But I'm a fan of Nasrat's ability to maintain distance, and I think that's where Rafa will have trouble here. We're talking about Rafa having a 3-inch height disadvantage and not to mention a 4-inch reach disadvantage. If Nasrat's able to keep this fight on the outside and just pick him apart and possibly knock him out later, I think he truly has the ability to nullify the striking that's coming back from Rafa. And Rafa is more of a guy that uses his hands, not much of a kicker, likes to, throw his jabs out there, but has decent power as well. But I think that his inability to find Nasrat's chin is going to be his downfall here. And I think that Nasrat will be very live to potentially knock him out too. Again, the guy's 12-0. He hasn't been knocked out, or he hasn't even lost a fight. But this is another level of competition. You're talking about going from Humberto Bandenay to Nasrat Haqparast. It's just a completely different level. So I think the line is absolutely accurate. I wouldn't be surprised if it reaches minus 500 by fight time, but I do like Nasrat here. I think he wins this fight quite easily, and I'll take him by KO, probably second or third round. I think we see Nasrat go out there and absolutely nuke this guy. So I'm going with Nasrat via, let's say, third round, KO. Yahya versus Ray Rodriguez. We got minus 290 on the UFC veteran Yahya and plus 245 on the sophomore Ray Rodriguez. Let's start off on the Yahya side, who we just don't get to see a lot of, right? The guy has fought, I believe, an accumulated 22 times in the WEC and UFC era. And, he's 15-7 in that stretch. But most of the guys that he's fighting or used to fight aren't even in the UFC anymore. One of the statistics that I dropped out there for you guys, or at least facts, was that 2 of Yahya's opponents have come against guys that are currently in the UFC. Eddie Wineland and Luke Sanders, and then 2 of his losses are against guys that are in the UFC, which is Ricky Simon and Joseph Benavidez. The rest of those 18 guys are no longer in the UFC or are either retired at this point in time. So he's been around for a while now. He's 36 years old, will be 37 down in September, but he still goes out there and shows decent, qualities. One thing that I think that is a lot or very much overlooked in his game is his striking. And, just off of memory, some people might just think, oh, it's absolute dog shit, but it's really not that bad. I've definitely seen worse from guys that are mainly jiu-jitsu players. Like, he has some pop on his shots. He even rocked Ricky Simon in 2 fights ago. Like, he has decent pop on his shots that he can, be somewhat passable on the feet until the fight finally hits the ground, which is where he does his best work. The majority of his runs obviously coming via submission, and that's where he wants to get it done. He has pretty tricky takedowns as well, too, from the body lock position, where he's able to, either just muscle his opponents to the ground or trip them with his leg, the inside trip, outside trip. We've seen both of those situations from him. He is very good with landing and securing takedowns, too. In multiple fights, he's securing multiple takedowns. Obviously not able to secure one against Ricky Simon, but can you really, blame the guy? Like, it's freaking Ricky Simon. He managed to survive 3 full rounds with him, even rocking him at certain instances. And then the Eryk Barzola fight, he takes the first 2 rounds and then gets absolutely whooped in that 3rd round. But Barzola is a very strong fighter himself, too, with a very solid top pressure game as well. I think that's what a lot of people are overlooking going into this fight against Ray Rodriguez, is that when you see Yahya losing these later rounds or losing these later rounds to the point of getting 10-8'd, he's fighting decent competition. Like Barzola, a lot of people are sleeping on that guy, but he's quite good. Solid grappler, solid striking, very strong as well, too. So that's something that people need to remember. But then when you see him fighting guys like the Henry Brioneses, the Russell Doans, and Luke Sanders, you see him able to get the fight to the ground and pull off his submissions. And that's just the way that it rolls for Yahya. Minus 230 against Briones, minus 220 against Russell Doan, minus 105 against Luke Sanders and pulls off the victory there, minus 115 against Ricky Simon 2 fights ago. You know what I mean? And then obviously in the Barzola fight comes in as a heavy underdog, wins those first 2 rounds with his grappling and his pace, and then obviously shows a little bit of his cardio issues later in that fight. I believe out of all the decisions that he's been in from the WEC and the UFC days, he's only in one fight won the 3rd round. And I think only a couple fights where he's actually taken a 10-8 in those rounds. But again, I don't think any of those guys are to the level of Ray Rodriguez. And I mean that, you know, in a positive light for past Yahya opponents. Ray Rodriguez, in my opinion, is not the best fighter out there. But I don't even know if he truly deserves to be in the UFC. He got a shot on the Contender Series, lost to Tony Gravely via finish, goes out there and beats a guy that is 7-12. And then gets jumped right into the UFC, super short notice, and then loses within a minute to Brian Kelleher, going right into his fatality move, which is that guillotine choke. He is a black belt apparently, but he's gotten submitted several times at this point, notably by Chris Gutierrez, who's pretty much just a striker. I'm surprised that, okay, I don't want to say just a striker. Chris Gutierrez has a solid all-around game, but he's mainly known for his striking and his Muay Thai and mostly his calf kicks. Yet we see, Gutierrez going out there and submitting a guy like this. I think Yahya absolutely dusts the floor with him. I don't see this fight even making it to the 3rd round. I think Yahya has the takedowns to go out there and, secure it against a guy like Ray. Ray doesn't have the greatest takedown defense. In that fight against Andy Perez, the guy that was 7-12, he went into that fight as a minus 1050 favorite, a huge favorite. Yet, that fight plays out hella close, even though he finishes him in that 3rd round. Not what you want to be seeing from a minus 1050 favorite. And then, justifiably so, comes into the Brian Kelleher fight as a plus 315 underdog. So people do understand that, he's not at that level. Even here against Yahya, plus 245 dog. Even if it wasn't a submission victory from Kelleher last time, I still expected him to be a big dog here against Hani Yahya. Now, I don't think that he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns of Yahya. I think Hani will be able to get this fight to the ground, and I think he'll be able to pull off a submission relatively quickly. The spot that I wanted to make my lock of the night play was the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 190. I highly doubt we see Ray Rodriguez pull off a knockout here in, 24 or 23 fights. He only has 3 knockout victories. And the only people to knock out Yahya in his career are Kid Yamamoto and Joseph Benavidez. Even at this point in his career, he's still going 3 rounds against guys like Ricky Simon and Enrique Barzola without getting finished. So yeah, his cardio may not be the greatest in the 3rd round, but it doesn't drop off like this to the point where a guy like Ray Rodriguez should be able to beat him. I'd be very surprised if we saw Ray Rodriguez get a stoppage over Hani Yahya here. But yeah, I think Yahya gets this fight to the ground relatively easily and pulls off submission pretty quickly as well too. I think his let's see what his inside the distance line is currently at, because that's something that I was looking at. Again, my lock of the night play would have been the fight doesn't go to decision for this, because instead of playing Hani Yahya at minus 290 for fight doesn't go to decision, you're getting minus 185, which I think is a great line. Over under 2.5 minus 155. Under 2.5 is great. But Hani Yahya to win by submission plus 110. Not too shabby. Yahya to win inside the distance plus 100 on a couple spots. So I think that's a good spot as well too. I think Yahya definitely wins this fight without much resistance. I don't think that Ray Rodriguez has the knockout power to put him out. Yahya has shown a great chin throughout his career. But yeah, I think he's going to have him ultimately beat on the ground. He's going to get this fight there within the first minute or two of this fight and then pull off a submission victory. So I got Yahya, round 1 submission. Charles Jourdain versus Marcelo Rojo. We got minus 255 on the Canadian and plus 215 on the Argentinian. Let's start off on the Charles Jourdain side of things, who's coming off a draw 2-1 Joshua Culibao in a fight that, I'm surprised that one judge actually gave round 1 to Charles Jourdain, as we saw him on skates in that first round with Culibao landing a big shot and really hurting him there. But we end up getting a draw on Charles, and I'm still not understanding the confidence that people have in betting him at that minus 255 range. Now, I'm a big fan of Charles, right? I've been following this kid since his amateur days back in the day, and all the way through TKO and obviously coming into the UFC now. But I think that Do Ho Choi fight was probably his kind of kryptonite in terms of like how it was bad for Alexander Hernandez to knock out Benio Dariush. Now he's just being fed to the wolves, and he's going to start coming up short. Andre Fili, much higher level of competition at that point in time. The Joshua Coulibaly fight, that's the level of competition we want to see Jourdain going out there and competing against, and start to accrue that experience within the UFC to, truly flourish into a proper star. He was a minus 450 going into that Coulibaly fight, and he didn't look like a minus 450 at all. Now he's coming into this fight at minus 255 against a fighter that has, 6-7 more fights than him. Probably a tougher time on the regional scene as well than we saw Charles Jourdain go up against in TKO. He lost that fight to TJ Laramie, who showed a great game plan in terms of continuously taking him down and grinding him out, just like one Desmond Green did as well. But Rojo doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to be taking that approach. He seems like a guy that's out there for entertainment, right? We pretty much know this guy for having that T-Rex celebration that he had after knocking some guy out. And, he's great. He seems entertaining. He throws with a ton of heat, throws spinning shit every now and then. But his main go-to seems to be going out there and trying to knock you out. He has a decent ground game as well, but I think that Charles might have him beat him in that aspect. But I see this fight mainly playing out on the feet. And with that said, there's the flashy style of Jourdain and then the power coming from Rojo. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Rojo actually land a bomb in that first round and potentially take out Jourdain. However, I'm going to go with Jourdain here because I do think he will be able to maintain the distance, use his kicks to keep Rojo on the outside, and really just get his game going that way. But it's too much to shell out minus 255 on Charles Jourdain. Like you're telling me that you're getting the same price on Leon Edwards. I'd much rather trust Leon Edwards against Belal Muhammad than Jourdain against this UFC newcomer in Rojo. So Rojo could, spring the upset. It's absolutely there. So I want to be, all privy to go out there and parlay Charles at minus 255. But this should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. I'll go with Jourdain to win this fight later, probably second or third round submission. I think that's definitely something up his sleeve. And, Rojo in his last 5 fights, he's been submitted twice, most recently by John Castaneda, who's in the UFC now. Doesn't really seem much of a submission threat in the UFC, more so of a guy that likes to throw his bungalows and knock people out. So I think Charles will have the advantage there, and if he's smart, that's the place that he should get this fight. Try to nullify the power coming back his way from Rojo, and then truly get his game going with his jiu-jitsu. So, again, minus 255 on Charles is a little bit too much. I think there's a nice price tag on Charles to win via submission. If I'm not mistaken, it's in that plus 500 range. Let me see if I can just pull it up for you guys real quick while we're doing this breakdown. Jourdain by submission is plus 550. Not a bad line, considering that that seemed to be the downfall of Rojo in his past couple fights. So I do like Jourdain here, not at the price tag, but I will take him to win this fight by either second or third round submission. Angela Hill versus Ashley Yoder. We got minus 300 and rising for Angela Hill and plus 240 for the Spider Monkey Ashley Yoder. Now, this is a rematch from a fight that happened in 2017 at the Ultimate Fighter 28 finale, I believe it was, but it was the night that Michael Johnson welcomed Justin Gaethje to the UFC, and we got a spectacular fight between them. But Angela Hill came out ahead in that fight against Ashley Yoder, where she was able to, keep the fight on the feet for the most part. She did get taken down a couple times, but again, did spring up to the feet and did some good damage from the striking realm, especially with her kicks, and that definitely gave her the advantage and the victory that night. In terms of recently, though, that was, I do want to touch on this. That was the second stint for Angela Hill in the UFC. If you guys remember, she was on the Ultimate Fighter 20, had a couple fights, went on a 2-fight losing streak to Tisha Torres and Rose Namajunas, who was only 4 fights deep into her career at the time, gets cut from the UFC, goes down to an Invicta, wins 4 fights, including capturing that Invicta title, and then comes back into the UFC, I believe on short notice, against Jessica Andrade, and she drops that fight. The next fight for her was against Ashley Yoder. Now, since Angela Hill has been back in the UFC, her record is now 6-7, which is a little bit salty, but a lot of people will say that she probably deserved the victories against Claudia Gadelha and Michelle Watterson. But Angela Hill has nobody but to blame but herself, and everybody can tell her that. She always fights close to her opponents. She never really changes up her game much. She always has volume, but her opponents are always able to land good shots in return, maybe more damaging shots, more shots that are more impactful in the judges' eyes, whereas Angela Hill just continues to do the same thing, right? she normally is the one kind of marching forward and stalking her opponent and landing some good shots from the outside, but she still eats shots in return, and it may look worse on the judges in the judges' eyes than it does for other opponents. Now, in her last fight, she did have a main event against Michelle Waterson. They were taking that fight, or at least that main event slot, on short notice since Alexander Rakic and Glover Teixeira and Thiago Santos were not able to go that night. But we saw them ready to go 5 rounds. Michelle Waterson had already been 5 rounds several times. Angela Hill had been to 5 rounds a couple of times as well. But we saw Michelle Waterson, pull ahead in that fight. There were a lot of different scorecards on that from all 3 judges, but they did unanimously give it to Angela Hill in that fight, to Michelle Waterson. But that was one, again, where we saw Angela Hill marching down Michelle Waterson doing a good enough job in terms of landing counter strikes and landing strikes of her own, not to mention getting a takedown here and there and doing some good damage from on top, as well as accruing a solid amount of control time. And that's where I kind of lean on here with Ashley Yoder, who, back when they fought in 2017, she was a purple belt. And she's just been working her butt off, and now she's a black belt. So I feel like if she does get this fight back to the ground and back to the positions that gave Angela Hill some fits, she might be a little bit more disciplined and be able to keep that top position and not really let it get away from her like she did in that fight against Angela Hill the first time around, right? We saw her fight Miranda Granger last time around, and I believe she dropped that first round, and then the second and third, we saw her truly start to come forward, get the takedowns relatively quickly as well, too, and even enough to get a 10-8 on pretty much all 3 judges' scorecards in that third round against Miranda Granger. So Yoder is improving on a fight-to-fight basis still. Now, they both still have salty records, 12-9 for Hill, 8-6 for Ashley Yoder, but I think that, Yoder being slightly younger at 33 years old, 36 for Angela Hill, I think this fight should be much closer in terms of odds. Now, I'm not talking about like pick'em or -150 or something like that, or like a -120, -125, but I still give Ashley Yoder roughly like a 40-ish% chance of winning. Plus 300 would indicate that she has a 25% chance of winning, and I think that's a little bit too optimistic, especially if you're an Angela Hill backer. We know she fights close fights. Why are you willing to pay the chalk on a woman that fights close fights like this? And I don't care if they, fought each other in the past and Angela Hill beat her that time. It wasn't a blowout by any means. Ashley Yoder still shows that she kind of have the chops to go out there, take her opponents down, use her size and her strength against them. She's gonna have a 4-inch height advantage here, as well as a 5-inch reach advantage. I think she will be able to close the distance here, bully Angela Hill up against the cage, get her to the ground, not to mention showing off that work that she's been doing at Dan Henderson's training camp. A lot of the work that you see on her IG and some of the footage that's being released is her working up against the cage, working up against the wall, trying to get takedowns from there. But that's her game. Get that black belt going. And I'd be surprised if we see Angela Hill keep the distance consistently for 15 minutes. So yeah, you bet your ass I'd be willing to take a little bit of a sprinkle on Yoder at plus 300. Now, I will take Angela Hill to win this fight, as I do think that she should be able to keep this fight on the feet for the most part and really land some good damage from the outside. But I'm not counting out Ashley Yoder. If this was a 50-50 fight in terms of the odds, I'd probably lean Angela Hill here in terms of making a bet on her. Or actually not even a bet, but at least saying that okay, this is a fight that Angela Hill should win. But at the odds that are currently indicated, and again, they're only going to get worse. I only expect them to get worse as the fight week goes on, as I believe that people are going to continue to parlay Angela Hill in this spot, and I think that's going to be a very bad mistake. I think that Yoder is live here. If she hits plus 300 on one of my books, I'm going to have to at least take a 0.5 unit stab. There's just too much value there to pass up, given the improvements that we've seen from her, given the fact that we've still seen Angela Hill getting taken down in her fights. Most of her fights, she's still getting taken down. That's a concern for me. And against a solid black belt like Ashley Yoder, I think Angela Hill could be in some issues and maybe struggle to get back to her feet. But, from what we've seen in her last several fights, she is able to get back to her feet. She's able to do some good work and kind of make up for that control time that she gave up, which is why I'll predict Angela Hill to win here. But from a betting perspective, I'd be on the Ashley Yoder side. And that's the side that I would probably make a bet on. Again, only a half unit play here, especially at plus 300. You don't need to risk too much to make at least a good little a bit of coin there, and that's the way I'm gonna be looking to approach this fight. So I'll take Angela Hill to win this fight via decision, but don't be surprised if you see me with the Ashley Yoder ticket by the time this fight goes down. Darren Stewart versus Eryk Anders. We got minus 175 on Darren Stewart and plus 155 on your boy Eryk Anders. Let's start off with your boy, who's coming into this fight with a new training camp. He's over there at Fight Ready. Most people remember that gym for. I'm pretty sure they're the ones that broke away from the MMA lab. I believe Coach Eddie Cha, not to mention Mr. Santino, I believe his name is. I can't remember. Something DeFranco, I believe his name is. It's just slipping the tip of my tongue right now. But those are the people. Henry Cejudo mainly trains out of that gym as well too. But that's the gym that he chose to go down and hopefully reinvigorate his career. He's coming up on 34, 35 years of age at this point in time. He really needs to turn things around if he wants to make another run for it, especially considering the run that he had coming into the UFC. Knocks out Rafael Natal, goes to a decision against Marcus Perez, and then for some reason gets a main event slot against Lyoto Machida, gets outstruck there and loses that fight via split decision, albeit. And then since then has gone on a 3-4 run. Not to mention it could have been 2-5 had he lost to Tim Williams, which it seemed pretty likely he was going to. But then he knocked him out with about 18 seconds left in that fight. Since then, lost 3 straight fights to Thiago Santos. That was a super short notice fight for both guys, going up a weight class as well too. I believe he just couldn't answer the bell for round 4, loses that fight, gets outstruck by Elias Theodorou, or a volumed, I should say, loses a split decision there, and then loses a decision to Khalil Roundtree, or Tyleel at that point in time. That's where we saw Khalil really change his game and start to implement Muay Thai striking into his game, and pretty much picked apart Eryk Anders, and just Anders could not do anything about it. Then he gets 2 very favorable matchups afterwards, right? Vinicius Moreira finishes him. Gerald Meerschaert, very close fight, could have gone either way, squeaks that one out, and then he loses the fight to Krzysztof Jotko, being absolutely outworked in that fight, out-volumed in that fight. We saw Eryk Anders accrue close to 6 minutes of control time in that fight, but still wasn't able to get the judges' nod there. 0 for 5 on takedowns, but he was heavily outstruck by Krzysztof Jotko in that fight. Darren Stewart, on the other hand, is coming off a loss to Kevin Holland, but he finished that fight very, very strong. It was a split decision loss too. And let's just see where Kevin Holland is at this point, right? After that fight, I believe he beat the Charlie Ontiveros super short notice, and then goes out there and takes out Jacare Souza in very emphatic fashion, and now finds himself in a main event slot the next week. So Darren Stewart is right there. That snapped a 3-fight winning streak for him, where he beat Bevan Lewis by decision, went to a split decision against Jourdain Wynn, probably deserved that fight regardless, unanimously, and then submitted Maki Pitolo, and then ran into Kevin Holland. We know what we're getting from Darren Stewart, right? A guy that's a great technical striker, has some power on his shots, and an ever-improving game all around. He is still getting taken down by his opponents. That's the issue here. Gives up 8 takedowns to Edmund Shabazian, gives up 6 takedowns to Jourdain Wynn, 1 takedown to Maki Pitolo, 1 takedown to Carl Roberson. Obviously, Jourdain Wynn and Edmund Shabazian, great grapplers and great wrestlers. But even in the Jourdain Wynn fight, right, gets taken down 6 times, but continues to get back to his feet and still wins that fight just off of damage alone. Here it's more so like the technical fighter against the more raw, powerful, athletic fighter in Eryk Anders. Eryk Anders has just been getting away with his athleticism, with his strength, with his power for the majority of his career, and I think he's forever going to be plagued by that. He's never going to be the most technical fighter, and I think that he's going to have to lean on his grappling and his strength to pull out the victories in his fights. Darren Stewart, I think, is just going to have him covered in those realms in terms of, outstriking him on the feet, making him feel the brunt of his shots. But both guys are relatively low volume, and that kind of concerns me in terms of which way to side here. I do side with Darren Stewart, as I believe he's the better overall MMA fighter here, but I could absolutely see an instance where Eryk Anders just pushes him up against the cage and slows this fight down as much as possible and makes it even more difficult for Darren Stewart to get his shots off. So I'm not trusting either guy here. You know what I mean? In that situation, more often than not, you go with the dog or you pass. But with that said, I just don't even feel comfortable with Eryk Anders. Let's see what kind of changes they can truly make to him or make for him down there at Fight Ready, especially in a fight here against Darren Stewart, which he should be able to win. But I still favor Darren. It's just the strength and the possible grapple / clinch fucking that we could potentially see from Eryk Anders here. Darren Stewart is one of the few guys that I like to reference in terms of guys that are able to make cardio changes. There are fights where we saw Darren Stewart's cardio absolutely fail him, like the Julian Marquez fight. Then we see him come out there and go a hard 2 or 3 rounds against other guys, and you don't see that cardio issues plague him any further. I think his cardio has been improved, and I think that's a part of his game that probably won't rear its ugly head again. But it comes down to him potentially getting out-grappled here, or just out-clinched, I should say, pushed up against a cage, controlled. But I think the more that this fight is at distance, the more that we'll see him kind of pick apart Eryk Anders, kind of how Jotko was able to do the similar thing, where, Jotko, the much better technical fighter, was able to keep the fight at range and get some good strikes off. But then on the Darren Stewart side, same thing. He should have that ability to pick him apart, land the bigger, heavier shots. The size difference is kind of what comes into play here. 1 inch height advantage for Eryk Anders, as well as a 1 inch reach advantage. But even from like a strength standpoint, you can definitely see that Eryk Anders is a stronger guy. So I lean Stewart here. I'll take him to win by decision, but I want no part in betting this fight. I think it's a very difficult fight to call. Could go either way, but I just don't see enough value on the dog here to take a stab on him either. So I'll go with Darren Stewart to win this fight via decision. Manel Kape versus Matheus Nicolau. We got plus 115 on the returning Nicolau, and we got minus 135 on Kape, who's making his sophomore run, or at least his sophomore entrance into the octagon after falling short against Alexandre Pantoja just about a month ago in his UFC debut. So let's start off on the Kape side, who's heavily touted coming over from the Rizin scene. His most recent loss in Rizin, or his last loss in Rizin, was to a Lucas Sasaki, where he just got completely out-grappled. And a lot of people thought if Alexandre Pantoja took that route, the fight would have been super easy for him to, get his hand raised. Luckily for him, Manel Kape, still kept the fight on the feet, and his just low output style really played into Pantoja going out there and outstriking him, outworking him, and outvoluming him en route to a decision victory. I don't think there was much controversy regarding who should have won that fight, as Kape was just a little bit too lackadaisical in that cage, dancing, doing all this crazy stuff, trying to show off, but, ended up losing the fight just because he just wasn't as focused on the fight. But that's just how he fights. He needs to get into a groove in the cage, and he needs to drop his opponents, and I think he's heavily reliant on knockdowns and knockouts to get his victories, and if he's not able to do so, he ends up on the losing end. And I think that's a very tough task here against Matheus Nicolau, who I think has him covered pretty much everywhere. We have a little bit more volume from the Nicolau side. We have a high, tight guard in his striking approach, especially after getting knocked out by Dustin Ortiz 2 fights ago, which was his last fight in the UFC. But since then, he's looking great. Obviously, maybe not the level of competition that he'd be fighting in the UFC, but still going out there and getting a solid work in, getting the submission victory over Gabriel 2 fights ago, and then the decision victory over Ephraim, where we saw, great striking display from him. He's a huge, great black belt in jiu-jitsu as well. Training out of Novo União. The guy looks in phenomenal shape. Even his girlfriend, I'm not sure if they're, engaged or married at this point in time, but his significant other is Luana Pinheiro, who's actually going to be making her UFC debut in the next couple events against Randa Marcos. So, they're in this fight game 100%. The fact that he even got cut from the UFC after the Dustin Ortiz loss was just crazy, right? Even Brandon Moreno got let go at that time. And now look at Moreno. Went to a draw with the champion, about to have his rematch with the champion as well. And I think that Nicolau is definitely one of those guys that can be up there in the top 5 of this division. Now, he was originally scheduled to go up against Tagir Ulanbekov here, and that's not a fight that I was able to tape or get to taping, but I was heavily leaning Nicolau in that fight, and I, lean him even more here against Kape, who I believe is a much easier opponent for him. With Ulanbekov, he had a lot more to worry about, the wrestling and the length and the strength and all that type of stuff that Tagir brings to the table, whereas Kape, is he going to submit Nicolau? Probably not. Is he going to out-grapple Nicolau? Probably not. I think the only spot here for Kape to win this fight is if he knocks him out. Again, he's just so low volume that it just leaves so much on the table for his opponent to take. And I think that Nicolau is going to take every little thing from him. Not to mention that he's probably pissed off that he got cut from the UFC to begin with. I think he's going to come out here and really try to put on a statement and put it on Kape himself. So outside of a flash knockout or something from Kape, I just don't see how he wins this fight. Nicolau, again, great combinations, solid volume, solid output, moves forward, really picks his spots. That Louis Smolka fight was just absolutely insane. The way he was just picking him apart, dropping him. I believe he recorded 3 knockdowns in the first round, which is absolutely insane. And the Dustin Ortiz fight was doing pretty well up until he got kicked in the chin. And that one was weird, right? He had his guard up, but it was still like the foot that crept past the guard and still landed on the chin of Nicolau, dropped him, and then he obviously got finished there. But, definitely not deserving of being cut after that. He's a minus 200 favorite going into that fight. So clearly there's potential in the kid, and I still think that he has a ton of potential to show. This is going to be his 19th pro MMA fight. Pretty much the same type of experience that Kape has had, but obviously he's been in the UFC, was on the Ultimate Fighter Brazil. I believe he lost. I'm trying to recall the name that he lost to on the show, but stuck around for quite a while after that. 28 years old, still young, still has a ton of time to improve, and a great training camp around him, and a great head coach in Andre Pederneiras. I feel like they can come up with a great game plan here to go out there and dispose of Manel Kape. So I like Nicolau to win this fight via decision, but I wouldn't to count out, either a submission or a knockout of his own either. The guy has a lot of pop in his hands, and he's very technical. He's very smart with his approach, and you can tell just off of his record alone, 15-2-1. The guy has a lot of experience, and he's a very high-level opponent. This is definitely not a step down at all for Manel Kape. If anything, I think that Nicolau might be a step above Alexandre Pantoja. I probably even, if we had Nicolau and Pantoja go up against each other, I'd probably favor Nicolau ever so slightly, but I'd have to heavily consider the Pantoja side here. But Nicolau, I think, has the type of pace and cardio to go out there and put a pace on one Pantoja and potentially bring out that gas tank issues of Pantoja later in the fight. But Kape couldn't do that. Kape was, again, low volume, letting Pantoja get his strikes off and fighting at his pace, which allowed him to go 15 hard minutes, which allowed him to, get his hand raised via decision without even have to worry about his jiu-jitsu or using his jiu-jitsu black belt. I like Nicolau here. It's tough for me to see where Kape wins this fight outside of knocking him out. I think if you like Kape, taking him inside the distance is probably the best approach here, but I still think that Nicolau goes out there and has him covered everywhere. So I like Nicolau, and I'll take him to win this fight via decision, and he's definitely one of my favorite dogs on this card too. I wouldn't be surprised if he closes this fight as a potential favorite, or even if this line closes at a pick'em, but I'm going with Nicolau to win this fight via decision. Jonathan Martinez versus Davy Grant. We got a huge favorite here in Jonathan Martinez at minus 320 and plus 260 is return on Davy Grant here. Let's start off on the Jonathan Martinez side of things, who we've seen a huge evolution from since he first came into the UFC. Coming into the Ping Yuan Liu fight as a plus 180 dog and knocking him out with a beautiful knee up the middle. Obviously drops a split decision to Andre Ewell back at UFC 247. I believe that was February of 2020. Very close fight, but I thought that Jonathan Martinez handily won that. He hurt Ewell numerous times to the body in that fight, and had a lot of success. But for some reason, the judges ended up seeing for Andre Ewell. I believe it was a split decision, so 2 of the judges saw for Andre Ewell. But Jonathan Martinez, man, this guy just continues to make improvements on a fight-to-fight basis. The Frankie Saenz fight, we saw him methodically pick apart Saenz and then take him out later on in that fight. And then the Thomas Almeida fight, that's one fight where, again, plus 120 dog comes in against the Thomas Almeida, who hadn't fought in several years, and kind of made it look easy. He won that fight pretty much every single round, methodically picked apart apart Thomas Almeida from distance and rocked him a couple of times as well. I love his distance management. The guy just, he's such a great striker, very surgical with his approach. Every weapon in his body he uses very efficiently, from his distance striking to his knees up the middle to even his teep, which allows him to kind of really attack the body of his opponents. And he hurt Andre Ewell with it a couple of times as well. So we know that he definitely has some pop on his shots. He doesn't have the craziest amount of finishes on his record, but the guy is definitely a killer and has that killer instinct, and it's only getting better and better on a fight-to-fight basis. Obviously, Mark Montoya is doing a great job with him up there at Factory X, and I think that his improvements will show on a continuously show, actually. He's 26 years old. He still has a ton of room to grow and a ton of time to flesh out into a complete fighter. And David Grant being on the wrong side of 35, he's going to have a tough time kind of dealing with this young upstart and Jonathan Martinez, who just doesn't really let the foot off the gas. And I know he definitely learned a thing or two from that Andre Ewell fight, even though he deserved to win that fight. He had a lot of success there in terms of continuously going out there and putting the pressure on one Davy Grant, or on one Thomas Almeida, Frankie Saenz, and even Andre Ewell himself. But I think that this fight will mainly be contested on the feet. My only little bit of a qualm here would potentially be if Davy Grant decides to grapple here. He has a couple, or most of his wins, I believe, have come via submission, and he can be strong in those sequences. Like in his fight against Gregory Popov, he knew he was outstruck on the feet or outgunned on the feet, yet was still able to go out there and kind of make it a difficult fight for Popov by mixing in those takedowns. That's something that he chooses to approach and pursue in most of his fights, especially when he feels like he's threatened on the feet. So I think that could be a side here that he goes with against Martinez. However, I think the aggressive style of Martinez will keep Davy Grant on the outside. Good clinch work from Martinez as well too will keep him on the outside, and I think that's where we'll see Martinez truly persevere and win this fight. I think there's a high upside of Martinez possibly knocking out Davy Grant. He does have a ton of power, and his stinging shots will start to add up, and I think that we'll see it start to take an effect on Davy, and I think we'll see him put him away. The Davy Grant fight against Martin Day, that's a fight where we see Martin Day not really adjust to whatever strikes are coming his way, not to mention the combinations that were coming his way. And, it was the same combination that Davy Grant was throwing for the majority of that fight, which I believe was a left or right hook to the body and then a left or right hook up top. It was just opposite hands. It ended up being that hook that put out Martin Day's lights. But yeah, I like Martinez here. I think he takes this pretty much on all judges' scorecards, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a late finish either. So I'll go with Martinez to win this fight via third round KO. Dan Ige versus Gavin Tucker. We got minus 155 on Dan Ige and plus 135 on Gavin Tucker. Let's start off on the Dan Ige side of things, who's coming off his first ever main event slot where he went up against Calvin Kattar, came in as a pretty hefty underdog at plus 225, and won one round off for Calvin. The rest of the four were easy for Calvin. But, it shows the progression of Dan Ige, who came into the UFC and, just didn't seem like he would burst into a guy that would eventually main event a fight night card. And that's exactly what he did last time around. But leading up to that, 4 straight wins, Dan Henry, Kevin Aguilar, Mirsad Bektic, and Edson Barboza, big wins in his last 2 fights before going up against Calvin Kattar. But the Barboza fight, super sketchy, possibly could have lost that fight. The Mirsad Bektic fight, a split decision. I truly believe he deserved the win in that fight. But again, another close fight against a guy that heavily gasses in the third round. What we see from Dan Ige, obviously really good black belt, decent striking, but low volume. And that's kind of where my qualm is with him here, that he waits a little bit too much. But when he does crash forward and throw his strikes, he is very effective with it. And I do think he has enough power in his hands to cause Gavin Tucker some trouble here. And that's always my issue with Gavin Tucker. I need the Tucker. For Tucker, I need the Rick Land and the Justin James fight to give us a little bit more room. We need to separate ourselves a little bit more from that. Like, see him go out there and get cracked by Dan Ige, maybe not go down, maybe at least show a good enough wherewithal to kind of keep his wits about him, and then come back and continue to win the round. That probably would sell me enough on Gavin Tucker and his chin issues that a lot of people believe that he has. I believe Tucker is the better fighter everywhere, to be honest. I think, the only things that Dan Ige truly hasn't beat on are power and level of competition. Outside of that, Gavin Tucker has been looking amazing his last couple fights. Not to mention the Billy Quarantillo fight last time around, where a lot of people were counting him out, thinking that he'd go back and lose the same way that Rick Glenn beat him. And he exercised his demons, went out there and beat Billy Quarantillo from round 1 to round 3, just easily. Outstruck him, threw in a couple takedowns, good work from on top, but his variety of strikes and his ability to mix it up to the body truly helped him get him the victory that night. And I think that's what's going to help him here against Dan Ige. He's got to be quick on his feet. In terms of size, he's a half-inch height disadvantage as well as a 5-inch reach disadvantage, but I do think that he's going to go out there and showcase the better striking skill set. It's all about worrying about the counters that are going to be coming back his way from Danny Gay, as I did say earlier that he does pack a ton of power in his punches. But I do like Tucker. I think that he can go out there and put on a solid performance, all-around performance, leg kicks to body kicks to, mixing it up to the body and to the head, mixing a couple of takedowns as well. That's something that we've been seeing a lot from him over his last several fights, where he's just, clinching up with guys, tripping them from inside trips, outside trips, body lock takedowns. The guy is showing it all. And he's really got to put it together now, right? He's 34 years old. Dan Ige is 29. If Tucker's going to get anything going in his career, it's at this moment in time. And he has a 3-fight winning streak that he's currently riding, really distancing himself from that Rick Glenn loss. And he's starting to get the higher step up in competition. He took this fight on relatively short notice, but still got in a solid enough training camp to go in there and fight a guy like Dan Ige, who I said, again, coming off a main event spot. So if Gavin Tucker can go out there and spring a win here against Dan Ige, he finds himself in that top 10 and will be fighting, maybe the Calvin Caters and the Edson Barbosas of the world. But he definitely needs this one. So if his chin can hold up, I feel like just by volume alone, he should be able to go out there and beat Dan Ige. I think that we've seen over the last couple fights that Gavin Tucker does have a good gas tank. His cardio does not just fall off a cliff after round 2 like it did in that Rick Glenn fight. And I think he's been proving it time and time again. Dan Ige is definitely the best fighter that he's fought out of the last 3 fighters. So I do believe that, we are going to have to see the best Gavin Tucker to truly see him get his hand raised this weekend. But I think that we'll see him get it done. I think he plays it safe, throws some volume out there, lands a couple takedowns, but just beats Dan Ige in a complete fashion. My only concern is if he gets tagged on the chin and gets put out, and his chin is an issue, right? If that truly is the narrative that people are going with, and if it comes to fruition, I wouldn't be completely surprised. But at plus 135, I don't mind this fight. Like you're talking about, in my opinion, a narrow path to victory for Dan Ige, which is knock him out. Because I don't see him out-voluming him. I don't see him submitting him. I just see him knocking him out. And then that's why I go with Gavin Tucker here, who has many more paths to victory in my opinion, but it's just a durability that's a bit of a question. So I'm going Gavin Tucker. I'm going via decision. And I believe the decision line was like in the plus 190s, close to plus 200. I think that's a solid spot as well. Danny is a very tough out. Calvin Kattar couldn't get him out of there in 5 rounds and was out striking him pretty much the entire time. I like Gavin Tucker. I think he wins this fight via decision. Misha Cirkunov versus Ryan Spann. We got minus 135 on Misha Cirkunov and plus 115 on Ryan Spann. Let's start off with Misha Cirkunov, who we haven't seen since September of 2019 when he had a beautiful Peruvian necktie finish over Jimmy Crute. He came into that fight as a minus 105, slight underdog there, but comes through with a big submission. Before that, the last 5 fights that he's been on, it's 2-3 in those fights, having another win over Patrick Cummins via submission, where he was a minus 345 favorite. But it's the losses to Volkan Oezdemir, Glover Teixeira, and Johnny Walker where, you see his durability come into question, and that's always going to weigh on him. But the one thing you got to give those guys is they have great amount of power. Well, specifically the Volkan Oezdemir and Johnny Walker fights. Those are the ones where you got knocked out by strikes. And then the Glover Teixeira fight, just gets out-muscled and out-jiu-jitsu'd. Like Glover Teixeira, no matter how old that guy gets, his jiu-jitsu is always going to be on point. His ability to ride his opponents and kind of transition fluidly from from half guard to side control to full mount to back take to full mount once again. It's just amazing how effortlessly he manages to flow against some of his opponents, even against a high-level black belt like Misha Cirkunov. In that fight against Glover, Misha just could not get up off of the ground once Glover got him there, and especially when he got that back mount, he just could not. Glover must have been absolutely weighing like a ton of bricks on the back of Misha Cirkunov, and Cirkunov could do nothing to get out of that position, even to an extent where you hear the referee say, you got to work, you got to do something, and you see his hand come out from defending from the shot started raining down from him from Glover, and he starts tapping. Luckily for him, the referee already stops it, but like that could have been a submission via strikes, but we don't see that often. It was a knockout victory for Glover that night, but we saw him completely outclassed in the jiu-jitsu realm. But we still see him shine brightly in the jiu-jitsu realm against other guys. Even if his fight against Nikita Krylov, it looks really good in that fight. Lands a couple of takedowns and then eventually sinks in the guillotine choke. And I think that's going to be his calling card moving forward. In the Jimmy Crute fight, I believe it was one of the announcers that were saying that he just fell too much in love with his striking once he got comfortable in the UFC, and it, ended up costing him. Now, he's going back to his bread and butter, getting those takedowns and trying to pull off submissions here. I feel like he has Ryan Spann absolutely blown out of the water when it comes to skill here. The only thing Ryan Spann will have as an advantage here, well, a couple things is the height, 2-inch height advantage, the reach, 2-inch reach advantage, and then just his power. But even that, I feel like is a little bit overblown at times. Is he going out there and absolutely one punch knocking out these guys? That's not really the case. You know what I mean? I believe he took Nogueira down and then just ground and pounded him and got a big win that way. The submission over Devin Clark, that was a weird one where we saw Devin just not really do much. And then the Sam Alvey fight, man, that one is a big red flag. When you're struggling to put away Sam Alvey and struggling to even win a decision against Sam Alvey, there's a lot of question marks regarding Ryan Spann's game. Almost got rocked and dropped a couple times against Sam, and then obviously give up that third round huge where Sam Alvey had a ton of success landing some big bombs on him in that fight. We saw the cardio of Ryan Spann really give up that night as well. And then the Johnny Walker fight, rocks Johnny a couple times, but it's just not able to pull him away. And then I believe I even called this. I don't know if it was on my podcast or something that I tweeted out, but I said I believe that Ryan Spann will get knocked out trying to take down Johnny Walker. And that's exactly what happened. We saw Johnny Walker defend on the takedowns even after getting rocked by one Ryan Spann. Landed a beautifully placed elbow that just floored Ryan Spann. Then he followed up with a couple ground and pound strikes and got Ryan Spann out of there. Now, I think that, again, the calling card here for Misha Cirkunov is going to be the takedowns. And I think the longer that he fucks around on the feet, the more that he's playing with fire. I think he gets his fight to the ground relatively easily. And I think that we'll see him, work to an arm triangle choke or, eventually give Ryan back, or Ryan Spann will give up his back and we see a ground and pound or a rear naked choke finish for Cirkunov here. So the submission prop will definitely be juicy. I think it's roughly around plus 155, which I think has a ton of value here on Cirkunov, as I believe, the majority of his fights finishing inside the distance. And I think that he has Ryan Spann absolutely beat in the jiu-jitsu realm. I think it's going to be tough to see Spann defend any type of submission here coming from the Cirkunov spot. So as soon as this fight hits the ground, it might even be a wrap. Like it might be like the Nunes and Anderson thing this past weekend, that as soon as the fight hits the ground, wrap it up, cash that ticket. Misha Cirkunov should have it in the bag. So the other spot that I feel like it would be a lot safer would be to play the under 1.5. Both guys, have a ton of finishes on their record. Misha Cirkunov especially has been finished, has gotten finished. Same thing with Ryan Spann, has gotten finished, has been finished, all in the first round. And I think it's sitting around that minus 145 range. I don't see this being like a lazy slugging type of light heavyweight fight like we saw with Sam Alvey and Ryan Spann. Sam just has this ability to make fights, drag on and make them much more difficult than they should be. And then Misha Cirkunov, on the other hand, he's more of a go guy. Let's get this done with. We're not getting paid by the minute here. We get a flat rate no matter what happens. Well, obviously, if you win, you get double your money. If you lose, you only get your show money. But again, it doesn't change no matter how long this fight goes. And that's why I think Misha Cirkunov truly comes into these fights with. And I think that's going to be what exactly happens here. I think he gets down Ryan Spann within the first 2 minutes of this fight and pulls off a submission. Might see another funky Peruvian necktie or something like that. But I think that once he finds that position, he's gonna secure the position and then slowly start working towards a submission of some sort. I feel like it's going to be an arm triangle choke. I feel like he's just going to be able to pass the guard of Ryan Spann and eventually find that submission. And I really like him here. I think that Cirkunov is a really good spot. Minus 135 isn't too bad. But again, it's just the durability that I question. We're only 2 fights removed to see him get like flying knee to shit by Johnny Walker. And that was quite some time ago. I believe that's closing in closer on the 2-year mark compared to the, the more recent Jimmy Crute fight that he had. But yeah, I believe he's full-time down in Las Vegas now at Extreme Couture. He was up here in Toronto at the Extreme Couture gym here, but he just didn't have the bodies. Like, there was one guy that he would train with a lot, is Todd Stout, who's another light heavyweight guy up here. But outside of Todd, there wasn't much other bodies for him to work with. So you got to believe he has to go down to Extreme Couture and work with other bodies, work with other guys that will give him some better looks and push him a little bit more too. So I like Cirkunov. I do like the under 1.5 a little bit more, but the spot that I'll probably be looking at is even Cirkunov round 1 submission, just like Amanda Nunes this past weekend. So I'll go with Cirkunov. I'll go round 1 submission, but the under 1.5 is probably where you want your money on in this fight. Time for the main event. We got Leon Edwards against Belal Muhammad. We got minus 260 on Leon Edwards and plus 220 on, remember the name, Belal Muhammad. If you guys remember, Leon Edwards was originally scheduled to fight Khamzat Chimaev. They were scheduled 3 different times, the last of which was this week. And unfortunately, Khamzat, actually, you know what? The first one I believe was Leon Edwards. Edwards testing positive for COVID. And then Chimaev recovering from COVID. That was the January 20th card. And then obviously we know everything that's going on with Khamzat right now. And, he posted something about like coughing up blood and all that type of stuff, potentially retiring as well too. But here we are stuck with, well, not stuck. It could be much worse than who Leon Edwards would be facing here. He has Belal Muhammad, who's coming off a victory over Diego Lima, and that happened at UFC 258 in February. So he has just about a month worth, exactly a month's worth of time, and not to mention a couple of days less, given that it was February that he fought in. He has a couple, just exactly a month to prepare for a high-level guy in Leon Edwards, who potentially is probably the best guy that he's fought since Jeff Neal, and we know what happened when he fought Jeff Neal, right? So, it seems like anytime Belal Muhammad takes a significant step up in advantage or in competition, he just comes up a little bit short. His last couple losses, Alan Jouban was his UFC debut back in July of 2016. He loses that fight via decision. Beats Augusto Montano and then loses to Vicente Luque within a minute and a half. That was way back at UFC 205 in November of 2016. So in 2016, he goes 1-2 inside the UFC. Then he goes on a bit of a run. Beats Randy Brown, Jordan Meehan, Tim Means, and Chancellor Country, and then runs into Jeff Neal in January of 2019. Unfortunate loss for him there. And then since then, another 4-fight winning streak. So if the trend continues, he's scheduled to lose this weekend against Leon Edwards. Another 4-fight winning streak, Curtis Millender, Takashi Sato, Lyman Good, Diego Lima. And you could probably say that Diego Lima is probably the 3rd or 4th worst fighter that he's fought inside that stretch. Or at least the performance that we got from Diego Lima was either 3rd, I'd say 2nd or 3rd. I think Curtis Millender, even though he won the first round off of Belal, the second 2 rounds were not looking good at all for him. But Diego Lima had success with that calf kick. Unfortunately for him, his cardio just could not hold up to get his hands going as well too, because I feel like if he at least threw some hands as well behind those calf kicks, it would give Belal Muhammad a lot more trouble and wouldn't have him so bouncy and jumpy and so pressury as well. Like, he just didn't let Diego Lima breathe at all in that fight, and he pretty much broke Diego Lima, I'd say, halfway through that second round. That's where you see the punches really start to come up short for Lima, start to, react a lot slower to the punches coming his way too. I like what we saw from Belal Muhammad and how he's kind of been transforming his game. But he's always been that kind of guy that's always energetic, bouncing around a lot, has solid cardio, is able to put the pressure on his opponents. But once he's fighting guys that are, that have him a little bit outskilled, or, he isn't as confident in as, staying in their face like he was against Diego Lima or against Curtis Millender, then he's going to have trouble getting his game off. And I feel like he's going to have that trouble here against Leon Edwards, who is just, super well-rounded. The only real flaw you can say about him is the fact that we haven't seen him compete since July 2019 when he beat RDA via decision in a 5-round fight. Level of competition, obviously, way in Leon Edwards' corner as well. But Belal brings some good intangibles to the game as well. The guy's very good with his pace, cardio. His heart is very much all in the game as well too. Just look at that third round in the Jeff Neal fight where he gets dropped a couple times, yet still keeps on chugging forward, still keeps moving forward, putting the pressure on Jeff Neal. Even in the Lyman Good fight, he's up 2 rounds going into that third round, gets rocked and dropped by Lyman Good, keeps chugging forward, keeps coming back, and still has a solid third round, even though he dropped it. But he still wins the fight overall. Takashi Sato, Diego Lima, middle of the pack kind of guys. But Leon Edwards, we're talking about a guy that was just on the cusp of a title shot. But for the whole COVID pandemic, he's scheduled to fight Tyron Woodley in a main event slot in London. COVID shuts that down and he gets pushed back, time and time again. And if he actually had that fight with Tyron Woodley and he beat him, he probably would have got a title shot right after that, right? I think Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington both beat Tyron Woodley during COVID. Gilbert Burns gets a title shot right after that. And if Colby Covington hadn't already fought Kamaru Usman, he probably would have got a title shot after that as well too. So Leon Edwards has put together a solid enough resume that, he warrants a title shot even at this point in time. I think Dana earlier today had said that if Leon beats Belal, he's 100% next for Kamaru Usman. And, it's hard to truly go against that. With Khamzat Chimaev up in the air right now, we don't really know what's going on with his future. And Kamaru Usman has pretty much beat all other contenders. I'd be interested in a Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington rematch, but I would rather see maybe Covington against Burns. And then the winner of that probably gets another shot. Maybe not so much on the Burns side, but probably Colby. But getting back to this fight, this is a perfectly matched up fight for Leon. He was really... It's tough to say that he was jumping into the deep waters by taking the Khamzat Chimaev fight because everything about Chimaev is just almost left up to potential right now. He's looked great against guys that are not even half or even a quarter of the level of skill of one Leon Edwards. So, Khamzat was even coming into the Leon Edwards fight as a favorite, but he was jumping right into the deep end of the pool against a very tough stylistic matchup. But now here he has a guy that, kind of works into his game. Belal Muhammad, a jack of all trades, if you want to call it that. Not the greatest at one thing. I'd say the greatest trait that he has is his pressure, is his cardio, and his ability to stay in his opponent's faces. But also his durability. I believe the only time he's been finished inside the UFC was by one Vicente Luque. But Leon Edwards has him pretty much beat everywhere. I think he's a much better technical striker. I think he has solid takedowns and good top control as well too. And not to mention, when Leon Edwards does get taken down, I feel like he's been on the ground against much tougher fighters that have solid top control, solid jiu-jitsu, and he's been able to either reverse position to the point of potentially getting the opponent's back, or even just getting back to the feet and reducing the amount of time that his opponent is in top control and beating him in that aspect of the fight. Whereas Belal, doesn't really show the greatest top control other than against guys like Curtis Millender, who doesn't really know how to get back to his feet. The Takashi Sato, his ability to get Belal Muhammad down at the end of that second round feels like something that Leon Edwards would be able to take full advantage of. I think Edwards has this very underrated ground game. For some reason, everybody just thinks he's just the striker, but he has a solid all-around game. His ability to take fighters down, keep them down, control them, reverse positions, even get in the back at some points. He's very, very skilled, that's for sure. He's pretty much landed a takedown in every single one of his fights outside, I believe it was the Kamaru Usman fight, the Claudio Silva fight, which why would you want to take the fight to the ground against a black belt like that? And there was one more fight that I'm just whiffing off the top of my head right now. But he does seek that. Like, he seeks a complete MMA game whenever he's going out there and fighting his opponents. And I'm expecting the same thing here against Belal Muhammad. Now, the one, outside of the inactivity from Leon Edwards, there are instances where we start to see him slow down a little bit later in rounds. And not to the point of, getting knocked out or getting controlled or getting like 10-8'd or anything like that. But I believe he dropped the 5th round against RDA, drops the one of the last 2 rounds against Cowboy Cerrone. But there are times where he picks up, the 3rd round against guys like Vicente Luque or even other opponents in the past. But I still think that he has Belal beat here. It's going to be tough to see Belal truly push the pace like he did against Diego Lima. I think he's going to give a little bit more respect to Leon Edwards here, and he won't be able to get that game off just as well. So I like Leon here, maybe via decision. Belal has gone a hard 5 rounds before in Titan FC, so I don't think this 5-round thing is going to be something that he's going to be shy of. I think he's up to the task, but my concerns are for him. He's coming off a fight where he got his legs kicked off only a month ago, coming in on short notice and taking a huge step up in competition. And we've always seen that when he takes huge steps up in competition, like going from Chance Country to Jeff Neal, he loses. Going from Augusto Montano to Vicente Luque, he falls short. So it's tough to find who his best win truly is. Maybe is Lyman Good his best win to date in the UFC? Jordan Meehan, given how he was 40 fights into his MMA career at that time. Yeah, it's tough to see how Belal truly overcomes this test here, unless Leon has dropped off a cliff in terms of his his cardio or his just the ring rust is too much for him. I find it hard to believe that Belal will be able to pull off the dub here. So I think Leon wins this clean all over the 5 rounds, maybe drops a round or two, maybe later in this fight. But I think that Leon Edwards, given that everything that he's been through over the past year and a half, the guy's more than motivated to go in there and get this job done, whether it's a KO, whether it's a decision. But I don't think we see him mess up this opportunity, fall back down the ranks a little bit, not to mention that amount of time off that he's had. He's really got to get some work done, and he's got to do it right now, right here, right this weekend. And I think we see him do just that. So I like Leon Edwards here, and I'll give the durability edge to one Belal Muhammad. So I'll say that we see Leon Edwards go out there and outpoint him for a 5-round decision. Couple takedowns, good significant strikes on the feet, control up against the cage, and also I do want to mention the physical advantages that Leon Edwards will have here: 3-inch height advantage, as well as I believe a 2-inch reach advantage, and then not to mention just the power. We can definitely see that Leon Edwards will have the strength advantage here as well too. So big fan of Belal. It would be amazing for him to go out there and spring the upset here, but I truly believe if it wasn't Leon Edwards coming off a 1.5-year layoff, this line will be closer to -400. So the fact that we're getting anything better than -300 is beyond me. So I like Leon here. I think he's a very safe play this weekend, and don't be shocked if you see him as my potential lock of the night play, considering that I feel like the rest of the card is a little bit lacking in spots that I feel that could, you can drop a lock of the night play on. So potential lock of the night here with Leon Edwards, and I believe he wins this fight via decision. And those are the breakdowns. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Again, big shout out to the Patreon members. If you guys want to join the Patreon, link is in the description below. $5 a month, a ton of great perks. Shout out to Coolbet as well. If you guys sign up on Coolbet, use promo code MMALOTN2. That's the number 2. They'll match your initial deposit all the way up to $200. 100% they'll match it up. So make sure you guys check out Coolbet, a great betting website, probably one of the best that I've been using up until this point. And again, big thank you to you guys, all the support, all the subscribers, all the likes, even the haters. Shout out to the haters as well too. You guys drive me to be even better and be a better person. That's what it comes down to being at the end of the day. So shout out to everybody that's been a detractor, a supporter. No matter what you have been, you've created the MMA Lock of the Night brand. You've put some legitimacy behind the name, and now I'm able to do this shit full time. Can't fucking wait. All right, good luck on your bets this weekend. I'll see you guys again throughout the week, and hopefully next week, I'll drop the podcast a lot earlier and hopefully aim for that Monday or Tuesday release. But really looking forward to breaking down the upcoming fights for you guys. And we got some big fights on the horizon. All right, good luck on your bets this weekend. Peace out.